Great. So my name is Cameron Bosnick, and I'm one of the architects on Connections. And today I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've learned and improved in our container-based delivery on Component Pack with Connections. So today I'm going to talk about the supported install upgrade types, Connections 8 and beyond, the changes to our delivery model. I'm going to talk a little bit about Harbor, our infrastructure upgrades and migrations, our Ansible deployment scripts, automatic updating with cron and Jenkins jobs, and upgrading the component pack with our Ansible scripts. So just as a quick refresher, the upgrade types that we support for component pack are our in-place upgrades, which should be familiar, right? They're our simplest way to do a deployment. We'll run our install manager to upgrade connection server, and then run our upgrade commands by extracting the zip file and installing to the server directly, which is great if you only have a small environment, right? But it's not good if you want to if you're tolerant to being able to take down the servers. But it's not good if you want to have 100% uptime, right? So we also support side-by-side and hybrid installs. So side-by-side is the one that I think most folks are familiar with. It's our most used install type. We do a new clean install to a different system. And then when all of our local changes and style changes look good, we can switch over our production to the to like our staging server or our test server. And then of course we also still support hybrids, which is mix and matching the different install types to fit the type of deployment that you might have running. So some things that we've learned with the old version of Component Pack was that we were delivering this thing as a huge zip file. I mean, we're talking, multiple gigabytes. You're installing these components, basically every component every time. There's a lot of overhead for creating the repository, for creating the registry, unzipping into the registry, and then doing the install. It's a lot of headache, a lot of extra work. Our deliveries have also been slow. We've been doing like annual releases of some of these things, and that's never been great, right? We want to make those faster. I already touched on this, but we do require setting up that internal registry every time. There's overhead associated with that, and adding these things to the registry is, a process where you're unzipping, adding, tagging. It's overhead, and times have changed, right? There's been Docker registry, but we haven't been able to use that. And now we have some new tools that allow us to take advantage of some of the strengths that we have in running private registries. And HCL has created a private registry, which I'll get to shortly. So for Connections 8 and beyond, we're going to switch over to quarterly releases of Component Pack. And this is a much better cadence that we've had before. It's going to allow us to push out regular feature releases, bug fixing, NPM security updates and container security updates a lot faster. This has been enabled by a new tool. This is the private registry I was speaking of earlier, called Harbor. And Harbor is a HCL ran and certified, container registry. The installs themselves, once we switch over to these Harbor-based installs, they're automatable with our Ansible toolkit. So if you're familiar with those, they take a lot of the pain and the headache out of doing these installs and these upgrades. And the quarterly release cycle is not just going to be on the component pack side, but it's also going to be WebSphere. This is going to be how we're going to be working going forward. We're also going to be keeping up to date with the last 3 releases of Kubernetes. This mimics what they do on, AWS and other container services, EKS and Google and et cetera. So we're going to always have support for those latest 3 in our Ansible scripts, and those will be timed with the release of our continuous quarterly releases, right? That's when we'll push those changes to have the most recent 3. Internally, kind of the way that we're allowing this to work and that we've enabled this is that we have 3 kind of big environments. The first is like our development environment. This is our day-to-day, individual developer systems, our pipelines, our Jenkins systems, where codes can deliver to GitHub, their tests run on pull requests. When things are validated and look good, we can push that up to what we call the staging server. And the staging server is pulling from an internal deployment of Harbor. And we deploy all of these systems continuously every day, I think 4 or 5 times a day with our Ansible scripts. So there's heavy use in testing on Ansible and heavy use in testing on Harbor. We run our verification suites again and do day-to-day use on this server and rallies on this server to make sure that everything looks the way we expect and that behavior of the components are ready. And when we have feature completeness and we're ready for our quarterly release, that's when we take a snapshot of that environment and push the Helm charts and the images up to our Harbor production. So that's just a Jenkins trigger on our side, pretty painless. And as soon as we push that button, the builds will be available to the customers. And I'll get to this part a little bit later here, but it's basically Helm install or Helm upgrade connections on your deployment to update to the latest versions of our images. So what is this Harbor thing? So Harbor is a repository that contains all of our charts and all of our images. It's hosted by HCL, and it's where we're going to be doing the delivery of all the component pack images going forwards. The access for Harbor, there's an entitlement process that has already ran through in the background. So if you're entitled to download connections, you will have entitlement to Harbor. When you do get access to Harbor, at the very top right, there's an icon up here that has your username. When you click that, it'll give you a username and token. And that username and token is what you're going to use to do your install and upgrade and connect to this registry from your environment. So I'm going to do 2 demos here. One is a demo of changing into the Helm registry using this Helm repo add command. And the next is doing an upgrade of an actual chart or image using Harbor as opposed to our old zip process. So in the background here, I've added, let me just pause this here. So we've got our Helm repo list. This is our old style registry that we currently had. And I'll just add in the background here, I've already got my username and token that I just mentioned from the earlier step as environment variables on this system. Here you can see username and password. So after this Helm repo add command, you'll get a message that HCL cr.io has been added. And if we do a Helm repo list, we can see the new registry. Now we need to make an update to our secret. So we're going to delete the old. And now we're going to create a new secret that has the username and token that were provided to us, in that previous step. So now if I look, you can see the secret has been created, which is what we need to enable Harbor. Any questions on any of this from anyone? It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so once this registry has been added, this enables us to now download updates to our images super quick and easy now that we're connected to this remote registry. And the way it's fast is it works just like Docker Hub. We're not going to download an entire Docker image. We only need to download the diff between the 2 images. So that enables quite a bit of speed up. So I'm just going to run a Helm connections list of the current version of Tailored Experience, which is this 0507 version. That's our target for what we're going to demo and upgrade on. So now I'm going to go into the existing values.yaml file. I'm pointing out the there's a change we made to ingress. I'll get to that in another slide. So that's what I'm showing there. So I'm going to look at Harbor now and figure out what the latest version is, see if I'm up to date or not. And since we've added that repo, I can now just do a search repo and it should show up. So you can see our newest version is this 8.30 version. Previously we were 5.07. So I can run this command, helm upgrade. And I fast forwarded through a little bit of this. Let me pause it and just talk about the command. So what I've done here is just told it to helm upgrade the current Tailor experience chart to our new version in the virtual repository called 220830. And then I'm providing it the chart that we have, and I'm giving it our namespace of connections. Should look pretty familiar if you've worked with our charts before. The difference here is that now it works. This isn't fast forwarded. That was almost an immediate thing, right? For that deployment. Chart's been updated if we run the grep command. And it's, a whole lot faster than doing the old zip file process. Okay. So to enable us to do the Helm registry, there are a few processes that have to be done for infrastructure upgrades and migrations. The first is that we've changed the ingress, which is what I mentioned earlier in that demo. So to move over to the Harbor environment, there's two commands you run. I've highlighted them in the slides here. One is the ingress delete, and then we just run a Helm upgrade connections ingress. And this will recreate our ingress controller. We've made some changes there. So, just running these two commands will get you up to what you need for running Harbor. There are some other infrastructure upgrades that have happened. We've moved from Mongo 3 to Mongo 5. And to do this, we're not allowed to distribute the image. So we instead have to pull a Docker file from GitHub, build that image, import the image into container D, and then update Helm with the image name and the tag that we've now created. The process for doing the upgrade is also just to export the data from Mongo 3 and then import to Mongo 5. Everything's pretty compatible, and there's a few commands to run to do that. So I'll quickly go over how that works. So our Mongo 5 Docker file is available on our public GitHub, the HCL Tech GitHub. So if you just do a git clone of that repository, you should have the Docker file and everything you need to build. And then the command is just simply a Docker build command. And we're giving it a tag name so that we can find this thing after it's been built. And we're just going to call it Mongo middleware 5 with a timestamp. I fast forward this part a little bit. It does take a little while to build these things. Once the image has been built, this process would look familiar. We now have to save that image into our registry. And we do that by creating a tar and then importing into container D. So we're going to save that and give it a tag so that we can find it in our registry. Now that that's been created, we can do our container D import command to pull that tar file into our registry. Is there a question? Sorry.
Can you explain again why it looks like we are creating a new MongoDB image? So I'd like to understand why we cannot use an image of MongoDB, which is out there on the Docker Hub.
This is pulling from Docker Hub. If I look at the Docker file itself, it is just importing the Mongo 5 Docker file. In fact, it may be even in the, and you may be able to even see it here, but it is pulling from the Docker Hub registry.
Okay. Thanks.
And then it's adding an entry point file that we've created on top of that, that adds some additional things that we need for handling like, the certificate exchange between Kubernetes and our MongoDB instance. Okay, now it looks like container D has the image imported. So I can go ahead and take a look, make sure it's up. Okay, I can see it there now in the registry. So to enable use of this image, I'll have to go into our infrastructure chart and point the Mongo image to the new one that we've just created. So we're now going to use the tag, just paste this in of the image that we just created. So now we're just going to deploy that chart that we've created. So we'll just do a quick Helm search repo, and we should see it now in infrastructure. And now we just run our Helm upgrade command with the new version. And now we're deployed, so I can do a list, and we should see a new version of the chart out there. Okay. There is an export step. You have to export the data from Mongo 3 and import into Mongo 5. For brevity, so I don't run over here, I'm going to exclude that from this demo, but it's just as simple as running a export command from Mongo 3 and an import command to Mongo 5. If you're familiar with doing a Mongo backup, it's the same process. And that's all in our documentation. Likewise, with OpenSearch, we're moving from Elasticsearch to OpenSearch in Connections 8. Again, this is due to licensing changes with Elasticsearch, but there's also some cool features in OpenSearch that we hope to take advantage of in future releases of Connections. So this is a similar process. There'll be an export of data from Elasticsearch 7 and an import into OpenSearch. And the version of OpenSearch that we're using has been forked from Elasticsearch 7.10, which is what's in Connection 7 today. So the data has complete compatibility with what's there already. So it's the same, again, process as we have for doing a backup with our current Elasticsearch. You create a file store to store this thing. You run the export command with the SSL certificate, extract the data, and then open up start the OpenSearch container. And once that's running, you can connect it to the backup file and then import the backup. So it's the same process that's been documented. Even the commands are the same between Elasticsearch and OpenSearch because it is forked from that same version. So I also want to talk a little bit about our Ansible deployment scripts. One of the biggest headaches that we had in Connection 7 is just all of the churn around creating the registries, creating Kubernetes, right? Getting all these things set up. It's a lot of work. So we do have our public Git repo that has all our connections. Ansible scripts are in this connections automation registry. It's the same scripts that we use daily to install and upgrade all our internal deployments. So it's got heavy usage. It's available as on our public Git repo for customers to use and create PRs, create issues if there's issues that are found there. We do look at those, and we are open to taking extensions if there's things that folks want to add. The way that the Ansible deployment scripts are set up, We have configurations for your servers that are defined in inventories, which contain things like your host names, which things do you want to even deploy, describe if you want, a small deployment, a large deployment, these types of things. And then we have different playbooks that can run the different actions, the different types of installs that exist in our product. So quick look at these. For our connections, setup connections complete playbook, this is probably a good way to get started with creating a test environment. And if you wanted to take a test or like a staging environment and update it on this continuous quarterly basis, this is a really easy way to do it. So all of these components should look pretty straightforward, right? It's all our infrastructure. We have a chart to set up the database, to set up our file share, to run the connections wizard, LDAP, TDI, WebSphere ND, and then finally set up connections, which is this special setup connections only chart. So even if you want to leave your infrastructure alone, you could just run the setup connections only chart to upgrade just connections by itself and not, install things you don't need. Or maybe you're pinned to a certain version for other reasons of the other infrastructure. This would kind of allow you to customize that a little bit. Likewise, we also have, deployment scripts for the infrastructure, for component pack. So this is, the big pain point, right? It's like, it takes forever to set up Nginx, HA proxy, NFS, Containerd, and Kubernetes. It's just a lot of work. So we've created one master chart called Setup Component Pack Infra Only that will do all of these, main infrastructure components of component pack into an environment, which saves a whole lot of time. And I'll give an example here of what the inventory looks like. And then I'll give a quick demo of what it looks like to actually run one of these things. So in this example, I'm updating the inventory file. I've got two files. One is the environment.config, which has things like the server host names and where's the database server, where am I going to pull the images from, that kind of configuration. But I also have configuration to install the different pieces of component pack. So maybe you don't necessarily want to install Teams, or maybe you don't want to install Orient Me, right, for example. So in this example, I'm going to toggle the tailored experience and give that an update. So all right, so I'm going to provide two variables here. Let me pause that real quick. One is the inventory file. This is the description of the component, what I had just demoed of what we're going to actually, install out of the component pack, and the names of the different servers. And then I'm giving it the actual playbook that I'd like to run, which is in this case setting up component pack. And because of that previous configuration file I showed, we'll only be installing tailored experience in this example. It'll still run through the other steps. Familiar with Ansible, it's going to do a fact check and see that the other components are already there. So it'll skip because it already sees Helm's installed and these other things are installed. But now you can see it's taking a little moment to do the tailored experience install. And it says task okay. And then it's skipping the rest of the things that are already done. And then it should finish. So there, if we do our Helm image list at the top here, you can see we've upgraded from this 0507 to this 0830 using our Ansible script. Very quick way to do these updates. As I had mentioned, these scripts for your staging or test environment could be executed as part of a Jenkins job or a cron job or shell script to update it at these quarterly intervals. Really easy to stay up to date with some of this tooling that we've created. And this is just an example script, right, of running everything. But depending on what you were going to update, you could just choose to run only component pack or maybe only connections. Upgrading component with Ansible. This is what we just demoed here. So configure your inventory and run our Ansible script. We have 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to open up for any questions that folks may have. Of course, there's also a big Q&A after this, but anything specific to this presentation, I'd like to open up to the floor now.
So just for better understanding, as part of the Ansible scripts, I think, if I got it right, we also lay down WebSphere, right? And we install the traditional components of connections. Is that correct?
Yes, we have charts to do all of the traditional parts, to install WebSphere database, SDI, TDI, the whole blue stack, as we call it, as well as the component pack side, Kubernetes and Nginx.
So for the component pack side, we also install the Kubernetes software itself, not just our workload, not just the component pack as a workload into an already existing Kubernetes cluster. We also install the components, the Kubernetes components. Is that correct?
Yeah, we if you would like to create the Kubernetes environment, the Ansible scripts will enable you to do that. You don't have to run that component, right? If you already have an Ansible environment, you don't have to run the infrastructure part of it. You can just run the Kubernetes, you can just run the component pack update playbook. So it's kind of a pick and choose.
Great.
The one thing that's kind of nice too, if you do choose to use things the way that we've configured it, is that the machine and the infrastructure that's been generated is going to be a guaranteed match to what we test with and use every day, right? We know what that environment looks like. So it's helpful too from a perspective of support teams, since they'll know where to look for the various log files and things like this. Saves a little bit of time there for getting any kind of data they need.
Another question. So by default, that new way of deploying things assumes that the connections environment from the customer is able to reach out to the registry, the Harbor registry, which is being operated by HCL. So in situations where the customer's connections environment is unable to reach out to the public internet and actually talk to the HCL provided Harbor registry, I assume we will also have instructions which then tell the customer to set up their own equivalent to the Harbor registry in-house and have the scripts run against that registry then?
Yeah, good question. So we're also providing the connections component pack as the zip as we have traditionally. In that case, it's the same process that we have today, where you have to create a registry within your system and then upload our charts individually to that registry and images to that registry. Okay. So that it looks identical to the existing approach we have today. I've also got a action slide here. If folks just wanted to take a screenshot of this or a picture of this, these are kind of some of the things that are worth looking at. We have our HCLCR.io. This is the Harbor registry where we're going to be delivering all of this work. We have the connections automation Ansible scripts on HCL Tech Software. And finally, we have HCL Connections Preview. If folks haven't had a chance to see Connections 8, I'm sure other folks have mentioned this as well, but it is out and available to look at. And of course, we're releasing Connections 8 tomorrow. So